Well, Alessia Russo did open her account for the season, and it was a sweet one for her as well, scoring it away to Manchester United. But United did get their revenge, Melvin Mallard's late equaliser. Daisy, you were in that away end, 1,200 Gooners up there. I mean, firstly, praise to you and all of those for going up to Lee. It was inaccessible by public transport for that kickoff time. You can't get the train there. It's a long way from London, but 1,200 travelling Arsenal fans, we've got to give them their flowers before we get into the game.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely one of the best away crowds that I've been in, full stop. And I've done some really good ones. I always find that the Manchester ones are always pretty good to say, that a lot do travel up and I know a lot come from around these areas as well. But yeah, I mean, the reception from the start was incredible. I think when, Leslie scored, the reception, the chant was I've never heard anything like it. It was so loud and yeah, I think to be fair, in terms of, I think it was a record attendance for them at that
Yeah.
stadium as well. So it really, collectively just shows like the efforts that are being put in, and I'm just really sort of glad for Leslie to get on the score sheet, and just I'm sure she will have heard the reception that she had all the way throughout the game. So yeah, really, really positive, and I always really do enjoy those northern away days.
Yeah, it worked out well for you, didn't it? And we saw you on the TV and on a few of the pictures as well, with Arsenal fans really making their, as you say, getting behind Alessia Russo as they did when they went there last year as well. And she was booed off by those home fans. It's still a little strange to me, when you look at some of the players who have maybe crossed divides and stuff and have done so in much worse circumstances than Alessia Russo, who, let's not forget, left on a free contract, after United really messed her around a little bit. So a little bit weird, but she was able to silence the crowd until that late equaliser anyway. I tweeted early on in the second half saying, whatever happens here, if Arsenal do not win this game, they will be kicking themselves. Obviously, when you concede a late equaliser, and I saw Joe Curry from the BBC, who's an excellent interviewer, and she said to Millie Turner, "Oh, Millie, congratulations on the win." And that's how it felt for United. And often when you do concede late, it feels more like a defeat rather than a draw. How did it feel for you in the away end? And do you feel that Arsenal will have been kicking themselves on the way home?
Yeah, absolutely. I think if you look at the stats, you look at the performance, I am going to sound like a broken record, but it's the same old story. I think in those big games, we know usually what kind of performance we're going to get from Arsenal. I think I'm going to just ignore that Bayern game where we lost 5-2 because apart from that, I've seen so much. There's so much more optimism going into those games than there is going to say, Brighton or even West Ham or Everton, because you do get that. I feel like I get more confidence going into those games. I mean, I've got to give credit first of all to Manchester United. I mean, Arsenal were all over them, especially, in periods during the game. But I do think defensively they were okay, and I do think they capitalised from Arsenal being weak defensively. It seems like it was something that they worked on. I mean, Arsenal from set pieces in general, defensively and attacking, just hasn't been. We'd been saying that for a while, but it hasn't been there. But I think you've got to give it to that Arsenal performance, especially even Russo. I thought that was one of her strongest performances. I mean, I've seen the stats, the shots that she had. Maybe she could have converted a few more chances, but in terms of the performance, I thought she was absolutely everywhere. I thought there was a couple of other strong performances in there as well. Emily Fox again, excuse me, Emily Fox again as well. Like she
Yeah.
just every week I feel like I'm praising Emily Fox. And Leah Volti, I thought had a
Yes, she was
fantastic
much
game as
better.
well. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I do think there was a lot of strong performances in there, and again, there was a bit of frustration, I'll be honest, from the away crowd at moments. We actually shouted shoot 4 times in a row until Leah Volti hit the post on the fourth attempt. So it got to the point where I think even Mariona was in front of the goal and she looked for the pass across and there was nobody there. And it's
Mm.
like we're sitting here saying how great of a performance Russo has had, yet when it comes to creating the chances, there's no striker. And I think a lot of people have spoken this week about Arsenal potentially lacking that striker that can take them to the next level in scoring goals. But in terms of like an all-round performance, I thought Russo did extremely well. It seems that final third is just always just seems to be the thing that kind of prevents Arsenal from getting the result time and time again. It's how do we fix that?
Yeah, it was a strange one, wasn't it? And the fact we did play well, but when we got in and around the penalty area, very similar to the men's game last night, it was just too slow and indecisive. And when we have to compare us to those cities and Chelsea's, and when you compare it to them and the goals they scored, Jess Parks pulled another rabbit out of a hat. I've just watched their highlights of it against Crystal Palace. I mean, Everton were woeful at the back against Chelsea, but Chelsea have still, gone there and put 5 goals past them. United fascinate me, they really do, because I looked at that team and obviously Turlin's been banging the goals in, moving from Brighton in the summer. They brought Bizet and Clinton, obviously Clinton back from Tottenham along with Bizet. Toon's been off the boil for a while. I think it's safe to say that for most probably of this calendar year. But they had a lot in their team, a lot of ways to hurt Arsenal, and they really didn't, until those late goals, until you throw on someone like Rachel Williams, who's been their saviour before in some of these big games. And I think it's at that point I said, this is a game we need to win now because we have struggled at Leeds Sports Village away from home. But I thought United were off it for a good 75 minutes. I didn't think they were good enough. And I think that's my frustration. And their best two players, absolutely, Turner and Letizia, the two centre backs, kept Arsenal out.
Yeah, absolutely. It's always that debate of whether you say that it was a strong performance from United defensively or, a stronger performance for Arsenal in terms of controlling the game. I think Arsenal had a lot of the possession, a lot of the shots, maybe not the best conversion rate in terms of producing. I think it was 19 shots, 4 on target. So it's another one of those where it's extremely frustrating to read and to, watch as well live. I think, yeah, for Manchester United, it was a weird one. I don't think they had that midfield controlled a lot. There was a lot of frustration in there. Clinton had a positive moments of turning that Arsenal midfield around, but I do think in general there's a lack of imbalance. I'm still trying to figure out quite what United went for in attacking sense. It seemed like they set Janssen up in front of the back line,
Yeah.
potentially to cover those midfielders that, for Arsenal, like Volti, who seem to be finding a lot of space on the edge of the box despite United putting Janssen there. But I do think that cost United a lot, not having sort of a strong ball playing midfielder. I feel like, Janssen, there was a moment where United could have countered towards the end and really, nearly hurt Arsenal. And Janssen played the most, awful long ball across the other side of the pitch. And I thought it's those moments where I can't quite understand it. But I thought the substitutions for United were positive. The substitutions for Arsenal were a bit disappointing in my opinion. I don't think Kafaji came on. Or if she did, did she?
Very late. There was a
Yeah,
very late triple sub that almost was just that almost done for the sake of it, just to get fresh legs on. So Hurtig and Cooney Cross came on with 3 minutes to go. Blackstenius came on with 12 to go. And look, Arsenal, the whole front four was changed. Behind them, everyone was kept the same, and that's worrying for me because if they've done really well and you're taking them off because you can manage minutes into the Brighton game, then fair enough. But Alessia Russo was the best player on the pitch. She was taken off with 12 minutes to go. Now she's going to flourish in that hold-up role. You're 1-0 up already. She's been causing United a load of problems. She knows United well. Blackstenius, I get the thinking maybe to look to stretch the defence and run in behind, but I think we'll all be pretty certain in saying Renee Slegers will have regretted that decision. Another one in terms of the subs is Frida Marnham coming off at half time. I thought she had a pretty good first half. She was in and around the box. She got a couple of shots away. She was creating. Beth Mead came on. She's always energetic, isn't she, Beth Mead? But I don't think she did anything really notable. So I did feel for Marnham coming off at half time, and it just shows again this number 10 role. I think back to the games Kafaji had where she was replaced at half time by Marnham away to Hecken. Arsenal are still not happy with that number 10 role, and obviously Caldente drifted into it second half. But there's still these questions remaining, in Arsenal's attacking football. But as you say, I think subs were a really key factor that Renee Slegers got wrong. Potentially a bit of naivety.
Yeah, I think in terms of the number 10 role, I actually, in terms of that game, preferred Caldente to play in that role rather than out wide. I thought it was a really sort of disappointing half in terms of her out wide. She didn't seem to want to do the usual things that she does. She couldn't, I don't know if that's part of it, a stronger defence against that, those United fullbacks. I thought the fullbacks were fantastic for United, as well as those centre backs. So I must say they kept Arsenal's wingers sort of
And
nullified
they've
for most of
struggled
that.
before, haven't they? When we
Yeah.
have played United before, our wingers have been exceptional, and they really went. Gabby George is a good player to have back from injury, and Aoife Mannion obviously providing that experience as well. And the likes of Clinton and Bizet were really deep as well. They didn't really stretch Arsenal's fullbacks at all, so they did get back and were well organised. It was a conservative United team, wasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm reflecting back to when Hannah Blundell gave away that penalty at the Emirates. It was stupid defending, and it was a very early, well, it was a very sort of early in the game at the time to get that yellow card as well when she played. So I think that's obviously something that they've worked on. And then I thought, obviously, having sort of Mariona drifting into that 10 and almost providing another option on that right hand side when Mead was playing there and having Fox involved as well, I think that really benefited Arsenal. It was almost outnumbering them, even though, United were playing deep and trying to defend in Arsenal's half. So I do think yeah, it substitution wise, I was a bit frustrated with Russo coming off as well. I thought, like you say, there's plenty for Russo to do in that game still. And the frustrating part is she's played 90 minutes so many times. We've had Stina coming on as well as Russo, and I thought that would have really been the better option in terms of having both there. But I must say, despite not have playing many minutes and, just coming back from fitness, I thought Lena Hurty provided something different. She almost got on the end of a cross, header at the back post. I think it was the goalkeeper that pushed it away. I do think there's still something there, and we haven't really talked about that too much, but it's interesting to see, what role she has in this side, especially, Renee seems to just be bringing her on to try and change the game and maybe potentially score a goal. But I think there's something there really. She wasn't scared to take on a player on that other side, and when you've got Lena Hurty coming on against tired fullbacks, no matter how good they are, I do think it provided a bit of something different to Arsenal's attack, especially in those like final 10-15 minutes.
Yeah, I wonder where she'll get that opportunity to start. That's the thing when the fixture schedule is as difficult as it is, as you and Claudia talked about last week. It's hard to look down the line and say, this is going to be a game where we can give her an opportunity. But I definitely see the point. And she seems to have spent her whole Arsenal career really coming off the bench, when she has done. And it is that height. We've seen her score lots of headed goals for Sweden, and she does provide a different outlet really to the likes of Ford. And Mead, look, a better performance from Arsenal. I think it was safe to say that if Arsenal had come away with all 3 points, we'd have definitely, taken nothing away from them. And I'd like to earmark Alessia Russo for praise. It's easy to do so when she scores, but I think the last few weeks, certainly in the Valerenga game, when she put a couple of balls in the net, didn't she, when they were offside? And this performance has been coming. I think with Russo, you're always going to get that work rate. Now, sometimes it's misplaced, sometimes it's almost put too much into dropping back or drifting wide. This game, she was really in and around the penalty area. She was, that front woman. And I thought she was really good. And if anyone was going to score, it was going to be her. A well taken goal, good bit of build up play. And hopefully that'll be a massive confidence booster, not only open her account for the season, but I feel like there has been extra pressure on her every time we've played United and particularly away. So just the fact that she scored against United, that's almost a little account she's opened as well. So a big moment in her season.
Yeah, definitely. And I think like you're saying, I thought somehow she was, always in the right place, and also her hold up play was still there. She still turned defenders. She still, I think she had one moment where she completely turned Millie Turner towards the edge of the penalty box, on that right hand side. So floating in and around the box and creating chances. And also there were so many moments where she was the one who would take the shot on. I think we had so much frustration as, watching in that crowd that there were so many times when Arsenal would play it across the box and nobody would be there. But Russo, every time she got the chance, it seemed like she wanted to take the shot on. She had one that went just wide. I think she had one that was maybe tipped over or something like that. But that she had so many opportunities where in recent games maybe, she might not have done that. So yeah, it's an interesting one. I think, there's so much for Russo to praise Russo on, but I think specifically it's got to be really like the fact that she took those shots on. Then when we've been frustrated maybe in recent games that she hasn't.
Yeah, big performance from her. And just finally, the late equaliser. I've watched it back a lot now, and I'm really struggling with it actually because it's a slightly fortuitous goal in the fact that Mallard is right in the way of Williams's initial header and is just able to flick it past Van Domselaar. What were your thoughts? I don't know if you've been able to see it back, but a lot of people have said, Van Domselaar has to do better. For me, she has to look commando box a bit more, but Mallard is very clever to be in front of her there. It's not a pretty goal though, whatever way you look at it.
Yeah, I think like from where we were sat, we could barely see anything. I actually thought it was Millie T that had got the header at first. You know what she's like in the box at times, but no, I think in terms of Arsenal defensively, obviously, like there's still some issues there in terms of I think just the marking in general. I think we've seen clips of Kim Little sort of dominating that box, which I found quite funny. Up
Yes.
against like the tall
Mallard. Yeah,
Yeah,
and that's
yeah.
why she was able to flick it past her because if you had a taller player behind her, it would have pinged off of her head, and it was just too easy. Because almost there, you'd rather have Van Domselaar against Malo coming out and claiming. Little's almost in her way there, but it is one of those where when it happens so quickly, it is hard. But you definitely look at it, and we talked about it in the Bayern game, just the wrong players marking the
Yeah.
wrong player. That seemed to happen again at United, and it's just it's a bad goal to concede, unfortunately. And Rene Slagers had said, this afternoon, let's not be emotional about it. Let's, think practically about how we are going to improve. It's obviously a part that we want to work on, she said, in our own box and defensive box. And she did say before the United game they had been doing well in the WSL defending set pieces. Probably not in the Champions League, as we said, but interesting thoughts. And we're still looking for more, I think, in both boxes in terms of set pieces.
Yeah, definitely. And look, I think United did well from that set piece. I think Van Domselaar in general in the game was good. She did pull off, some good saves in good moments, but I think you're right. It's just a case of perfecting that man marking. I don't know what specific, system that Arsenal are actually going for. I cannot understand it, having watched it back. I don't know why you would use Kim Little in that scenario, but obviously, let's kind of hope that that's something that they're going to learn from, and it's just a case now for Arsenal, as everything, just not repeating the same mistakes, which I think is a big frustration this season. We're saying we're going to get better and then we're doing the same things over and over again.
Yeah. So in the end, frustration, I think, from that game, and certainly something Renee Slager said when she went over to speak to the media after. But the positive signs are there and some more big games coming up. But just to wrap up on the United game, so Arsenal have drawn against City and United and lost against Chelsea. They're 7 points off Manchester United already, six off Chelsea, who have that game in hand against United, which I think is later this month now, as well. So that'll certainly be interesting. Chelsea look unstoppable. City look good, but not perfect. Even at times, Chelsea haven't looked brilliant, but still managed to win games. And obviously, that's something Arsenal, I think, are quite envious, is actually being able to put out a poor performance, but still get the ball in the back of the net. Realistically, would you say here and now that we've just got to focus on the top three? Because 7 points is a huge gap. What are we, maybe a quarter of the way into the season, just under?
Yeah, I think like let's not, you don't want to go into it being too delusional in that sense. I don't think the title is obviously there, and the reason for that obviously is partly the dropped points. It's not competing with those top teams, but it's also just Chelsea. I mean, I had watched most of that Everton game when Chelsea played them. Yes, Everton were poor defensively, and they've spoken about that, but Chelsea had so many chances that even the ones they didn't score, it didn't matter. And that's maybe the difference, is that they create so much and their players are in the right place at the right time for those moments. I think that's the difference. They're levels above Arsenal. We thought we were getting somewhere. The recruitment for Arsenal has been great, but it just seems like it pains me to say it, but I don't think we're on the same level right now as Chelsea. City, maybe on a good day we could beat them. I'm still optimistic that that away day could provide something for us, but I am very scared to go to Stamford Bridge because I don't right now I don't see a way for Arsenal to. I mean, we did compete in that game at the Emirates. I thought it wasn't as bad as maybe we'd anticipated, but I think Chelsea find a way, and I'm still not convinced that Arsenal won't drop points again this season, which is a big problem. And does that mean that United have a game in hand, or because they've
Yes,
obviously
I
not
do as
played
well, yeah.
Chelsea? Yeah, so that just makes it even worse, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's Arsenal have to be pretty much perfect, and then you're reliant on Chelsea and City to drop a few points, and then, as you say, beat City away, beat Chelsea away, and then obviously beat United. But we look at Tottenham next weekend, Brighton tomorrow night. These are the teams as well. Everton, rock bottom of the table. Obviously took 2 points off of us. West Ham very nearly did. I thought they held us for large parts of that game as well. And then, even teams like Villa who are down in 10th, Crystal Palace, Leicester City, I still think there's probably more to come from them. So, it's testament to these other clubs in the WSL. And we'll talk about Brighton towards the end of the show. But just firstly, the big news yesterday. Now, Catherine Batter from the Daily Mail actually put an article out a few weeks ago. So fair play to her for sort of looking into her crystal ball and seeing this coming. But Arsenal women were due to play Bayern Munich on Wednesday, December the 18th. That has now got to be moved to a different venue because the men are going to be playing Crystal Palace instead. on that same night. Now, Arsenal have to play their game on that evening at that time because it's obviously the final round of group games, so they have to play it at the same time as Juventus versus Vålerenga. There's likely going to be things up for grabs after Arsenal lost to Bayern Munich, and it's such a tough group. But it looks like Arsenal are going to lose the advantage of playing it at Emirates Stadium. It's either going to be at a different venue in or around London, or if Arsenal can make Meadow Park and talk to UEFA to make Meadow Park fit with UEFA regulations. I can't imagine UEFA will be too pleased about this situation, let's be honest as well, because Arsenal are now going to have to come to them and say we need to change the venue at fairly short notice. It's not a great look for Arsenal as a club, and if which we presume there will be because it's Bayern Munich. If this game becomes a very important one and we're playing it at, say, a Brentford or Watford or Milton Keynes or perhaps back at Boreham Wood, it's going to be a real shame for Arsenal to lose some of that home advantage. What were your initial thoughts? There's a lot we can get into here because it is a massive problem for the club. Let's be honest. It's the victim of having two teams obviously being successful in their competitions. But the fact Arsenal women are having to be moved and their date was in the diary first, that's the issue here. And fans of women's football have seen this time and time again.
Yeah, I think we're looking at the most like obvious and most disappointing point of it all is just the overall situation, not maybe specifically this, but the fact that time and time again it's the women who have to miss out. Arsenal have painted this as, playing at the Emirates, especially in such a big game. It's not just a random game. It could be absolutely huge and, so detrimental to the rest of Arsenal's season. They've put so much effort into this as well, like playing those games at the Emirates, selling these tickets, the people that are probably traveling there as well from Bayern and away fans and all the people who are making the effort to get into London on that day. I just think the priority is never women's football overall, and I think that's what people are going to take from this, the hurt and example that time and time again we are second choice. There's no other way to paint it really, because it's very hard to tell somebody that that's not what's happening when that's exactly what's happening. And yeah, honestly, it's just frustration at the situation and the fact that it's happened, and playing at sort of Brentford or wherever else, it kind of just defeats the point of that, that Emirates sort of final game and how crucial it could be. I just think, yeah, overall, I'm a little bit upset. And a club like Arsenal as well, you've got to point that out. Somebody who's trying to sort of be this, representation of growing women's football and how important it is to the club and one club and things like this, and then to go and do that, it's just another example of how much harder we have to work in women's football just to just to be able to play at the stadium that we were promised.
Yeah, and I don't think Arsenal have done particularly well in sort of softening that blow either, in saying, look, we're sorry to the fans. And, the statement was Arsenal fans have had to find this out through Crystal Palace confirming the game, then Arsenal confirming the game, then shoehorning in at the bottom of the statement further details regarding our Champions League match will be announced in due course. It comes across on the statement as an afterthought. Now, it probably isn't. But it almost shows that that men's side of the club have just overpowered this one and said, "Look, you lot are out of here." And all the great work that's happened, and we've seen it and we've praised it, but that doesn't stop us from calling out when stuff like this does happen. And Renee Slager's called it a bump in the road. She's couldn't sit there in her press conference where there's obviously media training and whatever goes on, and she wants to protect the club and the club's integrity, but she said almost gone, I can't fully defend this. We are frustrated on the women's side, but for Arsenal to just shoehorn it in and not even say, look, they didn't take the tickets off sale straight away. They were still up there. The Emirates seat map was still showing. Only today have they changed it and said, hold your horses. Tickets are no longer on sale. Bayern Munich have now come out and said it's going to be at an alternative venue. So the communication from Arsenal's not been good enough on this front for these fans who have bought tickets, who have booked hotels, and the supporters club were quite vocal in their criticism as well. I can't remember the last time they've come out like this quite equivocally against the club. So it is quite worrying times I think just the way they've handled it, and almost what's gone unspoken is that the men's team remain more important and the women's team on these occasions are disposable. We're not going to get the pushback from the club and the fans. We're going to move them out of the way because we're not going to risk, trying hard to find alternative arrangements for the Carabao Cup game. Almost what's gone unsaid, we can see it.
Yeah, it's so obvious, and that is the problem, the handling of the situation, like you say. I just think like It does just make you frustrated. You don't want to go over the same points again, but really something, something better should have been done in terms of the communication. I mean, obviously Renee can only say what she can say, but the fans have every right to come out. It's not just Arsenal fans either, it's a universal thing I've noticed this week. We've been speaking about it, and with the people that I know as well, and kind of saying, what does this say about women's football in general? Because it's hard not to look at it like that, I think. It's hard not to look at it as like if somebody like Arsenal is going to act like this, who's trying to spread such a positive message about how important the women's team is and how it's all, treated equally and things like that, to then go and do this, it really just it goes against that in my opinion, and it sends the wrong message to women's football as a whole. And the worst part is I don't think people are, well, maybe a little bit, but I don't think people are surprised because it's time and time again that this keeps happening, and it's just examples that just keep happening on a daily, if not, well, hourly basis at this point. And it's just, yeah, it's frustrating, and that's all we can say, really.
I mean, with the men's football and women's, sorry, and women's football schedule as cramped as they are, does it make you think we're never going to be able to solely play fixtures at the Emirates Stadium? Are we always going to need a backup ground?
Yeah, I think obviously that's something that we didn't really talk about when we talked about playing there is, what happens in those situations. And we've never really been in that situation to see how they would handle it. And now we have. I think maybe that's not the best first sign that they could have given us for optimism. I know that, the Arsenal players and everybody has come out and said how important that would be and how much they love playing there. And then, that just seems like they're just not being treated fairly in that sense. So it's going to be difficult. I wish I knew what the right thing to do was. I think mainly the problem is just the communication. It's just how they handled it rather than the actual situation. Obviously, it's going to be difficult when two teams play there, but I think that the whole handling of the situation in terms of the announcement and when it came out, that's potentially the worst part about it.
Mm. Yeah, frustrating times. I will just get the quote from the supporters club up now. Now, for more of an explanation on why we, the two games can't be more flexible, do have a look at my article on the Gooner Fanzine website. But the Arsenal Women's Supporters Club came out yesterday on Twitter and said, really disappointed by the change in priorities for this game. It's been set in stone for a while, and now shifting the date affects so many people, especially traveling and international Gooners who have already booked flights and hotels. So the Arsenal Women's Supporters Club and other groups as well and fans very united really in their criticism. And it's one of them for me where if a friend of mine organizes a birthday party 2 months ago and I've told him I'm gonna go and I'm gonna go, and then a different one comes up a couple of weeks before and I go, my friend is not going to be particularly happy with me. And that's the reaction that
Yeah.
Arsenal are going to have to expect from their fans here. And especially, like you say, you can't just use the Emirates as a way. And I'm not saying Arsenal do this, but there's a risk of clubs saying, look, everything's fine. We give you all these games at the Emirates. But if you're going to start changing them around, then fans are going to be less likely to buy these home advantage packs and season tickets if they're worried. And there's no guarantee that this is prevented again in future. And as you say, it does just seem to be the way of the world in women's football, even at clubs like Arsenal, who do deserve praise and have been so good. And the good thing is that this game is meant to be at the Emirates in the first place, rather than somewhere like Meadow Park or a different venue. But I think that is just the sad thing, almost, that we're always going to have these backup venues, these smaller grounds, or somewhere else in London. Are the men going to have to worry about that? Absolutely not. So that is the frustrating thing. But we will keep you up to date anyway with any movements for this game. And as I tweeted yesterday, Arsenal need to get it right. They need to make this up to their fans. It needs to be somewhere in London. I think Brentford would be ideal. Would you say they're not going to? I mean, people have said to me Wembley or West Ham, or there's no point bringing it to that sort of capacity ground, is there? I think we could see maybe 5 to 10,000 fans coming in. So I think somewhere like Brentford would probably be ideal if UEFA would allow it.
Yeah, I think so. I think you've got to look at, I mean, I don't know the specific numbers, like you say, on how many have sold. I know, Meadow Park is fantastic on a Champions League night, but I feel like that really undermines the entire event. I know that sounds, we've talked about Meadow Park. It's always going to hold a special place in our hearts, but to dump us sort of down to a smaller venue of that, capacity, I don't know. There's a lot of sort of mixed opinions on this. Maybe some people wanting it there. I do think Brentford is a good shout. I know we discussed Brentford potentially having been that stadium that Arsenal could have potentially used. It was floated around when we were talking about moving to a middle ground, sort of not going all the way to the Emirates. But yeah, I just think I don't really think Wembley's is potentially the
No,
best
it's not
venue.
good.
I don't.
It's
I think
not
that
good.
was something, yeah, that was floated around potentially not being so serious. But I think for the, I don't know, for those who were maybe being serious, I think that might be a little bit too far. But I'm not sure what do you know what Brentford's capacity is? Is it sort of the right size in terms of maybe what Arsenal will be looking for?
Let's do a super quick Google search. Leif would know if he was on here because he covers them regularly. 17,000. So that would be
Yeah.
pretty much spot on, wouldn't it?
That's a very small stadium. Yeah, but I wasn't expecting that. But yeah, no, I definitely think that's a much better option in terms of I don't I'm interested to see sort of what happens next in terms of people
Yeah.
going to the game or not going. I think now there might be some sort of because now I know this sounds maybe not so good, but now I'm even more tempted to go because I want to get behind get behind the girls and really I was already just debating
It's
whether to go
genius
or
from
not.
Arsenal in that case. It's marketing
Oh,
genius.
don't say that. Now I've made it look like Arsenal did it on purpose and it's a good thing. But I was tempted to go to the Emirates, but and now I'm thinking, I really want to get behind them and kind of, just to spite sort of the club's decision. But actually that's kind of maybe the opposite by doing that. But yeah, I think all in all, it's going to be I don't know what Arsenal could possibly do that's going to be well received at this point because it's already happened and people are already frustrated.
Yeah, I think what I'd say is we need this communication quickly. If we've got
Yeah.
Bayern Munich telling everyone that the game's not going to be at the Emirates, then why aren't Arsenal? I think that's not good enough, and we need to get that sorted. But look, I'll be across all of the developments, and we will see. I think one thing we will say is that I'm covering the Juve game away next week, and it's 80 kilometers away from Turin in the city of Biella, which is sort of nestled nearer to the Italian Alps and closer to Milan, I think it is, than Turin. So that'll be a ground where if what we might be sitting there and going, if this is UEFA regulated, then how on earth is Meadow Park not? But the
Yeah.
the one thing as well with Meadow Park is if Arsenal have sold, let's say, 5,000 tickets and we move it to Meadow Park, you've got to choose 1,000, 2,000 people to refund. So I don't think that's going to be a great idea either, and that is going to annoy even more fans. So it's a big decision to make, and we will follow it closely. Finally, then, we talked about Brighton a couple of times because they've been sort of threatening to knock on the door of those bigger sides in the WSL for a while, and they've never really been able to do it. They've had quite a managerial merry-go-round over the last few years. Obviously, Melissa Clark-Freed, who's now at Arsenal as part of the backroom staff, took charge of them. They've normally been a club Arsenal have had no problems against. We obviously brushed them aside on the last day of the season. You were there when obviously Miedemar scored at Meadow Park. This is likely to be the toughest test I think we've seen from a Brighton side yet. They've lost just once in the WSL so far. That was 1-0 away to Manchester City. Nikita Paris up against her former club. She's already scored against one former club in Manchester United. And Fran Kirby, we've seen what she can do against Arsenal for many years. They have got the players to hurt us on this occasion.
Yeah, I'm very scared. I think this is one that I'm just gonna start with that. I've discussed so many of those smaller sides that Arsenal struggle against, and I think if we look at that 5-0 from last season, we can take absolutely nothing. I'm just working on my preview at the moment, and I'm thinking this is not going to be a repeat of that. That was very much a fairy tale ending and sort of an anomaly, really, in the story of the season. I thought Brighton did quite well last season in general. I do think that game is not really a lot to take from how they're going to perform. They've obviously improved a lot. The signings have been ridiculously good. And not just sort of your like sort of big signings and they're not having an impact. This is obviously thought out and they've built on the foundations that they had. And the only advantage that I'm taking from this is it's not away. I know that Arsenal maybe haven't had that sort of home advantage as much as we would have liked, but I do think that will benefit them in some way. There's obviously some things that Arsenal can use to exploit. I expect it to be quite a similar game to the United game potentially. Brighton sitting back. I worry what they can do on the counter. I actually think there might be more of a threat in the attack than Manchester United, which is potentially saying something. But yeah, it's sort of a really big game. How I would take this as sort of one of the bigger games, bigger definitely than sort of Leicester, Everton, West Ham kind of vibes. I think we're looking more to sort of like the Liverpool, Manchester United. I feel bad grouping Manchester United in that category, but realistically, I expect quite a similar
Well,
game. I do think,
Brighton through with them, didn't they? So that
yeah,
they were the first team to take points off of Man United, and
yeah.
yeah, they look well placed. Of someone like Vicky Losada, I think is a Champions League winner. I really like Joralyn Carabali. I hope we see her up against Katie McKay because she's quite a character. Guro Bergsvend at the back as well, and Sophie Bagley has been a really good keeper time and time again, actually. But yeah, Nikita Paris, I think she was quite fired up to face United. probably it seems a while ago she was at Arsenal now, but I think she'll have a bit of a point to prove. And then bringing in players like Frank Kirby, yeah, massive, and Kiko Saker, who I think has scored the hat trick, didn't she, against West Ham? I think it was the first hat trick of this season. The loss for them is that Michelle Agyemang can't play against Arsenal, of course, as she's on loan
Yeah.
from. So that's a bit of a loss for them, but definitely plenty of ways to hurt us. What sort of lineup then do you expect? Renee Slager, she's used 8 players in all 3 of her games so far. She has opted for continuity. Little and Vouty were definitely better, as we mentioned earlier. But do you expect anything else to change? Lotta Wubben-Moy is back in training.
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested to see what happens with the number 10 position. I think obviously she's kind of experimented with that a lot and then tended to go back to Marnham. I'm interested to see sort of what she does with that. I mean, I think, Little and Volty, it's a good midfield. I wouldn't be mad if Kyra was put in there, but I don't think she will necessarily. The back line, I mean, we didn't even speak about Steph Catley. For me, that is such a strong option at centre back. I think I really, we had these moments where we weren't sure last season when Steph Catley was playing at centre back at first, and then she would come in, perform really well. And I think that Leicester game at the Emirates was one that stood out for me. She was fantastic, and I thought she was fantastic again. I think the back line, obviously, and the goalkeeper will stay the same. I'm interested to see if Marnham sticks in that position. Coming off at half time is a bit of an interesting one, but it seems like Kafaji's not going to get a chance to start. Russo's finally back in a confident form, so I very much doubt that she would be dropped. And I think Ford and Mariona are probably the best options in terms of the wide players. The only difference I would expect to see is if she goes brave, plays Mariona in the 10 and potentially brings, someone like me to come into there. But I don't expect any real changes. I don't expect the likes of Hertig, Cooney Cross, Blackstenius to start this game by any means. I think it's obviously a big game, and putting out maybe what could be classed as a second team would be a bit disrespectful to Brighton, despite the strength that Arsenal obviously do have in depth.
Mm. Yeah, interesting one. We'll have a live blog and player ratings to come as always. I think Leif is there at the Emirates as well. I'm covering this one remotely as I've got to be at Chesterfield versus the mighty Accrington Stanley on Saturday afternoon, so I didn't fancy going back down and up. But I am at the next couple. I'll be at Arsenal away at Juventus in the quite picturesque Italian city of Biella. It's going to be one heck of a trip. A very early morning flight as well. We've got Susie Lysett out there doing photography. So hopefully we'll be able to really explore both Turin and Biella. We'll get Susie out of her lens, and I'm going to try and do plenty of filmed content as well. So really looking forward to that trip. And then a few days later, I'm going to Tottenham. So moving swiftly on. Back to reality. But after hopefully a really good trip to beautiful Italy, we're then Tottenham away at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. I'm hoping to have Claudia Loy with me as well for that one. So a busy few weeks, quite pivotal few weeks for both Arsenal's domestic and Champions League aspirations. We've talked for a while, Daisy, about how important these 2 Juventus games are in the middle of Arsenal's group stage, and I think they look even more so now. It'll be really interesting how the next couple of weeks pan out.
Yeah, I know we mentioned this, me and Claudia, last week about the tough fixtures. For me, they're all tough. I'm scared for every single one. Tottenham, I think I've bought tickets to, but now I'm scared to go. This is what Arsenal does to you guys.
We'll go for a drink afterwards to make up for it. Let's
Oh
do
yeah,
this.
absolutely. I'm sure
We'll have a
everybody
pint
will be
of vodka.
there.
Yeah, yeah.
We get a right bunch of a mixture of journalists at the away Tottenham and Arsenal games. So yeah, I'm excited for that one. And is the Juventus next week or the week
So
after?
yeah, away is next week, and then home is the following Thursday.
Yeah. Okay, that is going to be a tough. Obviously, we spoke, didn't we, about make or break in the sense of the Champions League group. Those 2 games could be quite vital for Arsenal, sort of either getting through or not. So yeah, it's going to be a tough test, and potentially the final test for Renee as well. So interesting. I'm looking forward to seeing how we progress in that sense.
Mm. Well, I was talking to Jackie Oatley the other day, and a very well-regarded commentator who, of course, covers a lot of the NWSL, and she said at times Arsenal women are the most newsworthy club in the world, and it definitely feels like that at the moment. There is so much going on off the back of the international break already. For 5 things we've learned from Renee Slager's press conference this afternoon, head over to the Gooner Fan Team website. She also touched on things like Edu's departure, which of course will impact Arsenal in their search for her replacement. So Yeah, all happening. Really is at the moment. But we're looking forward to the next few games. Looking forward to heading out to Italy and seeing some of those Arsenal fans as well. And hopefully then I'll see you after the Tottenham game too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm looking forward to it. Despite maybe the nerves, I'm sure they'll soon go away. But yeah, they give us lots to talk about, don't they? So we can't fault that.
Absolutely. Daisy, look, thank you for covering me last week with Claudia. Thanks for your time as well, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, no worries. Thank you so much.